everybody, Blue Dooley, and we're out by the Hanson Bridge over by the Snake River Canyon, and we're going to talk about the ultimate transmission swap. I've got a full tank of fuel in the truck. I've ran about a tank and about a quarter through it, so I figured I should give you some feedback on my initial impressions of the truck and how it drives with the automatic transmission in it now. And as you can see, it's pretty hazy. I don't know how well the camera's going to pick it up, but it is really, really hazy out. I have a sinus infection, so there's still some work to be done on the truck, but I just don't feel good enough to do it, especially with the smoke in the air. So let's get back in the truck and talk in a little cleaner environment. Okay, now that we're in the truck and out of the smoke, this light right here is actually the transmission. That light right there is wired up for the check transmission light, and I just tucked it where the normal gear shift lever would be. With my polarized sunglasses, I can't read this at all, but it's in park right now, so hopefully you guys will be able to see it as it shifts gears, because it'll actually do a gear count, even in automatic mode. There is no tow haul mode on the Allison conversion, because it shifts like a commercial vehicle, and those are always in tow haul mode. So we'll back out of here. I got my lanyard for my air horns, which still are not hooked up yet. I need to mount the air tank. And my gauges aren't down here yet at all. I also got the dash cover, so now you can't see my cracked to hell dash. I'll try to keep my hands out of the way so you can see the gauges. It does like upshifting pretty quickly. But as you can see, it shifts real smooth. No fuss. The only thing I've noticed is this has the same problem as the Peterbilt and the Kenworth, and they don't like downshifting unless you give them a ton of throttle. It'd actually be better to just put it in manual mode, manually downshift it, and then to like pass and stuff instead of just hammer it down. But I am really happy with the way the truck drives with the transmission. So we'll jump on the highway. I got the GoPro with me, so we'll put the GoPro in the bed, and that way you can listen to the engine in the stacks a little better. So we'll be right back. Along. There is a little over 80 miles an hour. So the truck absolutely scoots. And that Allison, while it's not a race transmission by any stretch of the imagination, now I don't know how well you can see it, but we're doing almost 80, and at 80 mile an hour with the 5-speed, we'd be screaming at about almost 2,500 RPM. So now we can set her down at 75, which is kind of the speed I drive anyways. I'm so used to driving 18-wheelers, and the speed limit in Idaho for them is 70. I've gotten so used to driving at 70 that I don't really need to drive 80 anywhere anyways. So now, even at this speed, we'd still be over 2,000 RPM with the 5-speed. So now that we're a little under 1,900 RPM, we'll get better fuel economy, the stacks aren't quite as loud. much nicer driving experience. And again, since diesel's expensive, better fuel economy, always a good thing. Alright, we'll go through the roundabout here and get back out on Blue Lakes. Get in some traffic so the truck will do a lot of upshifting and downshifting. Like I said, I'm not sure which camera you're going to see the most view out of. The GoPro might not see anything outside of the truck. Excuse me. There also might be a lot of jump cuts because of coughing. Alright, so let's jump to the elephant in the room that I'm sure everybody is probably going to ask me the most. How much does the swap cost? Now, I'm not going to count any of the engine work I did. That's separate from the transmission. I went through CA Conversions, which is a company out of Florida, and all they do is Allison swaps. Doesn't matter if you have a 12 valve, 24 valve, common rail, 6.7, any Dodge, they can put an Allison behind. Same with the Fords. You can get an Allison 6-speed behind the 7.3 Power Stroke, which to me would be it'd be just like the 12 valve in an Allison. Those two would be the ultimate combinations of powertrain setup in my mind. Because the 6-speed Allison is going to have a better overdrive than anything that came in a 7.3 Power Stroke. And again, it shifts like a commercial vehicle. So when we come to a complete stop, it unlocks the torque converter, and before it shifts into second gear, it locks the torque converter up, then it shifts into second. So the transmission, built to handle over 500 horsepower, which is what I asked them for. Triple disc torque converter to handle the horsepower. Again, they'll kind of configure that however you want, or what your power needs and towing needs are. They did recommend to stay below 500 horsepower, which I think mainly is more for people who want to do a lot more towing than I do. The problem with that is on their website, they have a few glowing reviews from people who are running like 800 or 1,000 horsepower. So if you really want to recommend people stay below a certain power level, don't have people claiming how much horsepower they have. So CA Conversion sent everything needed to hook the transmission up to the 12 valve, hook my transfer case up to the 6-speed Allison, 2 ECUs and the wiring harness, plus shipping from Florida, was a little under $16,000. It is an expensive proposition. I won't even mince about it. It's expensive. But to have gone from a 5-speed manual, which I would eventually maybe have problems driving with because of nerve problems in my leg, $16,000 is less than a new truck. That's just the way I look at it. $16,000 costs less than a new truck. I knew it was going to be expensive when I went into it. Dealing with CA Conversions, it has been pleasant. Any question I ask usually gets a pretty quick response, even with the time difference. I believe I have sent Casey an email at like 6 or 7 o'clock Mountain Time, which would be what, 8 or 9 o'clock East Coast time, and have gotten a response. Again, a little of the communication in the email might be my fault, so I'm not going to fault them for that, because sometimes I think what I want to say, and I think I wrote it down, but I didn't. So yeah, dealing with Casey at CA Conversions, awesome. She and her husband, I believe, run the company, and they know their shit. You're not really going to stump them. They've been doing it a while, and it's the only thing they do is Allison's behind whatever engine you have. One of the very few gripes I have with the whole swap is they sent me a link to an Amazon page for a transmission cooler, and I didn't really pay attention to its dimensions. And the transmission cooler they suggested is too damn big to put behind the grill of a second gen truck, Dodge. Period. It just won't fit. I spent far too long cursing and swearing at that transmission cooler and gave up. I went to the junkyard and managed to find a aftermarket, not a name brand aftermarket, but an aftermarket transmission cooler that would kind of bolt where the transmission cooler is supposed to go on the truck, which would be my recommendation if you are looking into doing the swap, either if you're going from a manual or an automatic, or an automatic to an automatic. Get a good transmission cooler designed to fit your truck. That'll make the installation process a hell of a lot easier. Not even gonna mince words on that either. Find a proper transmission cooler for your truck and use that. So that's gripe number one, is the transmission cooler. Gripe number two, we've had a few cooler mornings, like below 60 degrees. And the Allison doesn't really like the cold or cool right now. I'm gonna have to get a hold, before you jump to judgment on that, I need to get a hold of KC at CA Conversions and double check what RPM the engine needs to be at in gear, so it'll stay idling and it won't kill it. I don't know if maybe my fuel shut-off solenoid's a little out of adjustment, so when it's cold, it doesn't like to stay running, and that's my problem. Or if my idle's a little too low in gear, cold. Right now, we should be about 700 RPM-ish. 750 maybe. Which I thought in the email I asked her earlier was about where you needed to be. So I might have to check some fueling issues on the truck. It runs really good after it's warmed up. The Allison does shift a little harsher when it's cold after it comes up to temp, which, even again, we're coming into winter, so we'll find out how quickly it warms up. Which they do send a little valve body that goes in the transmission cooler lines, so it bypasses the cooler until the transmission has warmed up. Should mention that. Now, to bolt the Allison to the Cummins, if you've seen my build videos, there's an adapter plate that you bolt to the back of the engine. The transmission bolts to that, and then there's a big aluminum donut and a little flat plate that go between the transmission and the transfer case. All of that stuff was machined really well. I have nothing but positive things to say about the machine work on their parts. The wiring harness is really clean. Everything's labeled. The plugs are spread out through the transmission harness, so they can only pretty much plug into the sensors they're right next to. Makes installing that a breeze. So, the only thing I have negative to say about the wiring harness is the plug to plug in the scan tool. That wire is on the short side. I'd like to have seen it at least another
6 inches longer, maybe a foot longer. That way, since you mount the computers to the firewall underneath the hood, you can run that into the cab and not have to reach so far up into the dash to get to it. I think they actually suggest in the directions that you install that plug under the hood. And to me, that just doesn't make any sense. Otherwise, again, nothing but positive things to say. So I've probably got, I should have been tracking, I'll be honest with you. I didn't even pay attention to the mileage when I started driving it. Probably have between 800 and 1,000 miles on the truck. And again, the few tiny nitpicks, like I have to let it warm up just a little bit before I can pop it into gear and head for work, which isn't that big of a deal anyways. Once it gets colder, I'll start the truck and then I'll have to scrape the windshield and windows and stuff. So a minute and a half it takes me to do that, or 2 minutes is enough time for the engine to warm up and everything to be happy. But hopefully you've noticed over my talking how nice the transmission's been shifting. Like I said, I cannot be happier with how the way the truck drives with the Allison in it. I like rowing gears as much as everybody else, but the Allison just works so well that if I ever get another diesel truck and replace this one, I'll probably Allison swap it. Because I can tell you I won't get a new one and it won't have a 10-speed in it. Actually, this is probably the newest truck I'm going to own. The next project I want's even older, but that's for different videos and whatnot. So to kind of recap, it's expensive. Is it worth the expense? For me, absolutely. Again, with the nerve problem, I don't have to worry about being somewhere and having problems with my leg in the clutch and being stuck someplace. My wife can drive a clutch, but because we had a heavy-duty South Bend towing clutch in it, if she was having problems with her arthritis in her knees, because she used to be a gymnast, so her knees are just totally shot, and I was having a bad day, we'd be screwed. So if you're kind of in a position like me, where you can drive a manual, but maybe your clutch leg's weak, or you have a knee replacement, or something that kind of makes it uncomfortable to drive a clutch anymore, but you absolutely love everything else about your vehicle, I would say it's worth the expense. 100%. Because now I don't have to worry about, even if I completely lose the use of my left leg, as long as my right leg still works, I can drive the truck and enjoy it for as long as I have it. The 5-speed manual and this Allison, again, almost 400 RPM drop at 80 miles an hour going down the road. And since, like I said, I'm used to driving trucks at 70, I almost, even driving my personal truck, I almost always stay at 70. So that puts me well under 2,000 RPM, closer to the engine's power band. The truck just runs really, really good. Over. It just runs great. That, and since the Allison does, even though it can't shift as fast as say a race transmission, it can certainly shift a hell of a lot faster than you can ever cram that NV4500 into a gear. So when you mash the pedal to the floor, it brings a smile to your face. And that's kind of all I really want with the truck. a very well thought out and well put together transmission swap kit. The bolts you need are included, bolts, nuts, all the hardware, the bracket for the kick down, the throttle position sensor cable if you don't actually have a kick down cable bracket like I do, or if you're doing a custom build and don't have any kind of brackets at all for the throttle cables. The wiring harness does have a signal wire for a speedometer if you don't have a speedometer. So it's pretty well plug and play. You just yank all the old stuff out, bolt the new stuff to it, hook a ground wire, 2 power wires, and the cable for the throttle position sensor, and you're done. All of my frustrations, again, were just little stuff that the truck fought me with. If you've changed a clutch or are pretty confident in your mechanic ability and you can follow directions really good, it's definitely something you can do in your driveway. I would recommend having someone help you though, because transmissions and transfer cases are heavy, and for me, just having a second set of eyes, it just makes things go so much smoother. So yeah, if you've put a clutch in something or swapped out a torque converter in something, doing the swap will be a piece of cake. And at this point in time, I just can't be happier. I cannot be happier with the decision to do the swap. Makes driving the truck easier for me. And again, the wife is on her knees. It's easier for her to drive. If I don't like the way the transmission's shifting, saying towing something, I can just pop it down into manual and shift it myself. So I think that's going to do it. Like I said, I'm happy. It's expensive. I can't tell everybody who watches this video that yes, you should absolutely run out and drop $16,000, $17,000 to do this transmission swap. It's really going to come down to what you use the truck for and what you're comfortable with. If you don't add any power, most of the transmissions, stock Dodge transmissions, will handle stock power. If you want to up the power, you can spend the money and upgrade the transmission. I just believe at the end of the day, because CA conversions makes the transmission shift like a commercial transmission, because the torque converter locks up before it changes gears or changes to second. You're not building up as much heat, you have less slip in the transmission, so it's just going to last that much longer, frankly, than the Allison will, even in a Chevy. I've driven 20 plus trucks with an Allison automatic, and I have never had transmission problems with the Allisons. As I mentioned earlier, they don't always like downshifting unless you give them a lot of throttle. The Peterbilt I'm in right now has a 6-speed Allison, and it is. If you want it to downshift, you have to put the pedal all the way to the floor, loaded or not. It just does not want to downshift. And the way it's set up, you can't manually force it into 5th out of 6th. The T330 we have has the push button selector, so if you want to manually downshift it, you just hit the down arrow. So, as always, click like and subscribe, and we will catch you in the next one.